The Amish had been growing more tomatoes in one summer than most people see in a lifetime, and nobody taught you why. I spent the better part of 20 years doing what most backyard gardeners do. I bought the fertilizer in the bright orange bag, I read the tags on the transplants, I watered when the soil looked dry, and every August I'd walk back inside with maybe 30, 40 tomatoes if I was lucky, telling myself it was the weather, or the soil, or just bad luck. Then, one summer, I drove through Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and I pulled over on the side of the road. Not because I was lost, because I couldn't stop staring at what I was seeing. Rows of tomato plants. Nothing fancy. No irrigation system I recognized, producing fruit so dense the cages had bent sideways under the weight. I counted plants in one row. I stopped at 43 and didn't feel like I'd made a dent. Stick around to the end of this, because there's one technique I'll share, something they do in the final weeks of the season that I've never seen written down anywhere, and it changes everything about how much fruit you actually pull in. The first thing I had to understand was that the Amish relationship to tomatoes is not a hobbyist relationship. It is a production mindset applied to a very small piece of land. Every square foot is producing. Nothing is decorative. When you grow food to feed your family and sell the surplus, you think about plants completely differently than someone growing food on a Saturday afternoon for the pleasure of it. I mean that without judgment. I was that Saturday gardener. But it reframes everything. The Amish aren't trying to grow more tomatoes. They're trying to waste nothing. That's the foundation the whole method sits on. Every decision flows from one core principle. You are not managing plants. You are managing conditions. Get the conditions right, and the plants do what they were designed to do. Fight the conditions, and you spend the whole summer compensating. Now, here's what caught my attention when I started watching more carefully. The soil. Every Amish garden I observed, and over 2 seasons I made it a point to look closely, had a quality I can only describe as alive. Not fluffy from tilling, not dark from synthetic additives, dense and dark in a settled way, like the earth had been composting itself for a long time. And it had. I've grown on sandy soil, heavy clay soil, and everything in between. None of it looked like this. The Amish practice something they don't call anything in particular because for them it has no name. It's just what you do. In the fall, after the season ends, everything goes back in. Spent plants, kitchen scraps, animal manure, straw from the barn. The whole bed is turned and left to sit all winter. By spring, that material has had 5 or 6 months to break down. What they're building, without knowing the scientific terminology for it, is a mycorrhizal network, a web of fungal threads in the soil that essentially doubles or triples the root system of every plant they set in the ground. Modern soil science has spent decades studying this and keeps arriving at the same conclusion the Amish have lived with for generations. Healthy, biologically active soil outperforms synthetic amended soil in long-term yield every single time. So here's what you actually do. In the fall, right after your last harvest, pull everything up. Every plant, every stake, and add 4 to 6 inches of organic material across the entire bed. Not bagged compost from a store, raw animal manure, preferably aged at least 60 days, mixed with whatever organic matter you have. Straw works, dried leaves work, grass clippings work. You're not being precise here, you're feeding a system. Turn it in lightly, 8 to 10 inches down, and leave it alone until late March or early April. What you'll find when you come back is soil that crumbles between your fingers, smells faintly sweet, and feels almost warm in your hands. That warmth is biological activity. That is your foundation. You need carbon-heavy material, straw, leaves, wood chips, and nitrogen-heavy material, manure, green clippings, kitchen scraps. Roughly equal parts by volume. Mix it, turn it in, leave it alone. The soil knows what to do. The biology has been sorting this out for longer than humans have been farming. Spacing is where most home gardeners make a mistake they never fully recover from. We crowd the plants. We can't help it. The transplants are small, the bed looks empty, and we're optimistic. 18 inches apart, maybe 20, and by July we have a wall of foliage, no airflow, high humidity between the leaves, and disease pressure we spend the rest of the summer fighting. The Amish plant tomatoes with a minimum of 36 inches between plants. Row spacing runs 4 feet across. If you've never grown this way, the garden will look ridiculous in May, more bare soil than plant. That bare soil is not wasted. It's where air moves, where water reaches the roots rather than pooling on leaves, where you walk without compacting the root zone. By August, those plants will have filled their space completely, and they'll be healthier for it. You'll have fewer problems to solve because you created fewer conditions for problems to start. There's something else happening in that open space too. When you give the plants room and build the soil the way I described, the fungal network establishes itself properly across the full bed. Crowd the plants and you fragment that network between competing root systems. Wide spacing lets those underground threads connect fully, and what researchers have found is that this connectivity allows plants to share resources. The whole bed performs more like one organism than a collection of individuals fighting for position. Watering is where the method diverges most sharply from what most people do. Most of us water from above: hose, sprinkler, overhead drip, water landing on leaves, running down stems, pooling at the surface. The plants survive, but surviving is not thriving. The Amish water at the root, deeply, infrequently, and in a way that forces water to travel before the roots find it. The technique involves creating a small depression, 3 to 4 inches deep, in a ring around each plant at about 12 inches out from the stem. You pour your water into that ring, slowly. All of it goes down. The roots grow outward and downward to find it. What you're building over the course of a season is a root system that extends 18 inches or more in every direction, drought-resistant, well-anchored, and connected to that fungal network underneath. Conventional overhead watering creates shallow roots because the water never penetrates. Shallow roots means stressed plants the moment conditions get dry. Stressed plants abort fruit. Deep root watering is the single biggest yield lever in this entire method, and it costs nothing. It also cuts your total water use significantly because water pooled in a depression loses almost none to evaporation. Fix your watering method and you've simultaneously solved half your disease problems. Every element here is doing more than one job. Let me tell you about the mistakes I see most often. The first is amending the soil at planting time and thinking that's enough. One application of compost mixed into the hole when you transplant is nowhere near sufficient for a heavy-producing plant. You need months of biological activity across the entire bed, not a pocket of good soil around one root ball. The second is watering on a fixed schedule instead of reading the plant. Tomatoes in week 3 have completely different water needs than tomatoes in week 10. Water by observation. The slight drooping of lower leaves in the late afternoon is a signal. The morning recovery tells you what the plant needs. The Amish don't water on Tuesdays and Fridays. They walk the rows at first light and they watch. The third mistake is planting the same crop in the same bed year after year. The Amish rotate, always. Tomatoes follow a legume, typically beans, which have spent the prior season fixing nitrogen back into the soil. You're not just managing disease, you're deliberately sequencing crops to build what the next crop needs. And the fourth mistake is giving up on a struggling plant too late. If a plant isn't performing by midsummer, yellow, stunted, dropping blossoms without setting fruit, pull it. That space and those soil resources do more good redirected elsewhere than propping up a plant that has already told you it's done. What all of these mistakes share is the same root cause, treating the garden as a set of individual tasks rather than a connected system. The Amish don't think about soil prep and spacing and watering as separate decisions. Each one reinforces the others. When the soil is right, the spacing makes the watering work better. When the watering is right, the spacing allows the soil biology to thrive. Pull one thread, and the whole thing performs less than it should. The bonus I promised you, the one that doesn't appear in any gardening book I've ever read, and I've read more than I'd like to admit. In the final 3 to 4 weeks before your first expected frost, the Amish begin stressing the plant deliberately. Watering is reduced to barely enough to prevent wilting. Any new growth above the existing fruit clusters is pinched off completely. All flowers that appear at this stage are removed. There is not enough season left for that fruit to mature, and every calorie the plant sends to a new flower is a calorie stolen from a tomato that's already on the vine. All energy is forced into the fruit that's already set. What this does is accelerate ripening across the entire plant, simultaneously. Instead of the long, staggered trickle most of us get, a few ripe tomatoes a week while the rest slowly catch up, you get a concentrated harvest window where the majority of the fruit is ready at once. For a family that's canning and preserving, this is the difference between a manageable harvest and a chaotic one. For a home gardener, it means you're pulling everything at its peak. It requires nerve. Your plants will look stressed. The lower leaves will yellow. You'll want to water. Don't. Trust the process. You're not nursing the plant through winter. You're finishing the season on your terms, not the calendar's. This method rewards you in proportion to how seriously you take the foundation. The soil work, the spacing, the root-deep watering. These aren't the exciting parts. The exciting part is walking out in August to a garden producing more tomatoes than you know what to do with, from land you already own, with inputs you can generate yourself, and no store-bought fertilizer in sight. That's what I saw on the side of that road in Lancaster County. Not magic, not a secret product or a special seed variety. A method applied with patience by people who have had generations to figure out what works and zero tolerance for what doesn't. You might follow this exactly and still have a modest first year, and that's okay. The soil needs time. The fungal networks don't build overnight. What you're investing in isn't just this year's harvest, it's the garden you'll have in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. The real secret isn't any single technique in isolation. It's treating your garden like something you're building over time, not starting over from scratch each spring. Begin the soil work this fall. That one step costs you an afternoon and costs nothing at all to buy. Do that first, and everything else that follows will make more sense once you can feel it working beneath your feet.